Good big panel. I want everybody to take a minute to imagine something. I want you to imagine that you are in a burning building. You're on the 3rd floor, and there's no way out. The only thing that you have is your cellular phone. You go to make a phone call, and you realize there's no coverage. There's no way for you to be able to make that phone call. And you realize you're doomed. But then I want you to imagine there's a public safety DAS system installed into that building. The firefighters are running in, and they know just where you are. They have the communication method to be able to do that. They rescue you and they save your life. It's a very powerful message. But I want you to imagine what happens if they didn't have that public safety system? What happens? We're gonna cue a video. I want you to watch this, but know it might not be for everybody. So it's graphic, but I want you to cue that if you could for me.
Okay, 6-7 to division. What, hello? Rescue, hooks to rescue, Mayday! Go ahead, Mayday, what's your location? You know, rescue, hooks, there's a panel out of here, hurry up! Battalion 1 to the division, you get that needed rope on the roof. Top floor, with those on the top floor, Patty. Division 7, 10-4. Vision 7-2, ladder 5-9, finish truck, roof on the rope. We got guys out the rear window, okay? Mayday, 5-6. The engine on the fill. Fireman down in the rear. 2 firemen down in the rear. 2 firemen down in the rear. Let's go. We got 75. Put your pumps in your pavilion. Mayday, 2 firemen from the top floor in the rear. We need them. Company in the rear. They had it. You let him know. You got 6 guys out. They're real slow. You got it. Yeah, Battalion 1-7 division. Go ahead, 1-7. Have you got a good report from the roof? What's going on in the rear, Patty? Kevin, the whole company just shoots out the rear cages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Jump in the rear. We need massive here. Massive injuries. 10-4, I've already notified EMS. They're calling a bunch of buses, okay?
Thank you. We lost 3 brave firefighters that day. It was pretty incredible. But it doesn't have to be. We can have communications. We have the method. We have the ability to do it. Welcome to our public safety panel. This is the future of old public safety technology. My name is Laurie Caruso from SafeEye Technologies. I'm a consulting firm for public safety. I'd like to have my panel go ahead and introduce themselves. Go ahead, Dan.
Hi, my name is Dan Hoffman. I'm the president and founder of a company, Cell Signal Solutions. We started in the cellular side, a DAS integration company, and we now have a division, just focused on public safety and the ARCs in New York City.
Hi, I'm Dino Giordano. I'm the Vice President of Product for MicroLab. Been working in the public safety sector of the business for approximately 20 years, and we're looking to expand more into the market with this growing infrastructure.
I'm Rich Fann with JB&B. We're a multidiscipline engineering company here in Manhattan. I've had 38 years in the RF field, and I'm specialized on public safety DAS.
Hi, Dennis Burns. I'm with ADRF. I'm a regional manager and also the public safety SME for the company. Been in this industry now for, well, almost 30 years, since 1993. I'm a member of the NEDAS Advisory Council and actually newly appointed a member to the Safer Buildings Coalition Board of Directors.
Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mroczkowski. I'm the engineering manager for ESS Incorporated for working with public safety data and New York City ARC systems.
Hi, I'm John Foley with the Safer Buildings Coalition. We're a nonprofit trade association that's very interested in making sure that every manner of communication inside a building, that it be useful during emergency works. So you need to be able to dial 911, receive mass notification text, first responders, radios, and cell phones need to work inside the buildings. Also happen to be the grandson of a police officer, the brother of a police officer, and father of a police officer. So there's a very personal topic for me.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate having you here. It's very powerful. So we are in an industry that changes constantly. We don't see the same thing actually with public safety. So we've heard about disruptors in the industry, like Nextel's push to talk is going to take over for two-way radio traditional systems. We've heard about there's FCC's national interruption option that is also part of the ability to take out the two-way radio, including as well now we're talking about FirstNet. We're seeing two-way radios are still here today. And I'm curious why we are still seeing that. Do you think they're gonna go away anytime soon? John, I'd like to ask that question for you. Do you see this going away anytime soon?
No.
Right.
Okay then, cocktail hour.
Would you like me to expand on that a little bit? Okay. So this is a matter of, land mobile radio, push-to-talk radio has been around for a long time. And they are a standby for the people in the fire service or the first responder community that are actually in there doing the work in harsh environments. And these are hardened devices. But the world is changing. And one of the things that smartphones do very well is process data and manage applications. And so as the industry evolves into making sure that you have great visibility to what's going on, situational awareness is what they call it. Knowing things when you show up at a building, for example, what floor were the fire sprinklers triggered first? Are there any people whose cell phones are pinging on the 5th floor in the west side of the building? Is there a standing day tank half full of fuel on the loading dock? All those things are useful pieces of information that a first responder can use when they're responding, and they're better provisioned on a data-enabled device. So it's not one or the other, but both. But there are some other drivers that are leaning towards LTE, and one of them is cost. The city of New York just recently moved 35,000 of their police. New York Police Department moved 35,000 users off push-to-talk radios onto cell phone type devices, about half the cost.
Thank you. Dino, what do you think?
Well, John mentioned costs, and they say New York City. New York City had, the allocation to do that. So a lot of the other municipalities, they don't have the budget to move over there. They might have just put in a new, 700 megahertz digital P25 system, and they can't allocate new devices and infrastructure for that. And I think a lot of things that people miss too is the ergonomics of it. This is mission critical communications. You can't just change in the mix. It's not like you're downloading or streaming a video faster. It's critical communications. You need it to be seamless. So a lot of it's training, and firemen, they're very specific on that. That they have their volume knob just right with their glove. It's not just a matter of how you're gonna work a smartphone when you're in a critical situation, and you need to communicate first and foremost. So I think there's a lot of training that has to go along with it, and just having some compliance with the market of new technologies coming in there. It can't be a fast track. It's got to be a slow roll. So I think the two-way radio being a seamless and if it ain't broke, don't fix it type communications. That's gonna kind of prolong for a little bit before the new technologies kind of emerge in the infrastructure.
Thank you. So Rich, Does this meet the ever-changing code requirements?
Well, I think the code requirements exist to actually aid the two-way society, right? The two-way users. We know that two-way, what Laurie calls an old technology, I'm going to call a mature technology. A little more.
Fair enough.
So, two-way radio is an extremely mature technology, right? It's been used forever. It's tried and true. It's a proven technology. It works fairly well, pretty well in a lot of cases. And most of all, the first responder is very comfortable with that radio in their hand. They know how to use it. They've been relying on it. So I think that where the codes and regulations come in are to enhance that technology inside of buildings, because as we've heard in the video, there's an issue with coverage in buildings on the public safety side as well as cellular. The other issue, I think, is that it's easy. If you listen to that video and realize how smoky and chaotic it is, and there's a person in full turnout gear with very heavy gloves, they want easy. They want to push the button and be able to talk to somebody, and that provides this for them. So they hold on to the old technology or the mature technology as long as they can. They're used to it, and it works very well. I think there's one final reason that you see people holding on to mature technologies, and talking to the agencies, they will tell you that any change in technology, it might not even be a technical discussion, right? It comes down to they have to change their standard operating procedures. And when they do that, they have to reprint all of their documentation. They have to come up with new training programs. They have to train all the personnel. And that is a big time and money investment. So if something has worked, like Dino said, if it isn't broke, don't fix it.
Dennis, what are your thoughts there?
So I think codes are right. They're a very good thing, right? Codes in our business. First thing, I mean, codes make buildings safer, right? So with these new codes that are coming out, it's all about making sure that when the first responder enters the building, the message gets through. So codes are very positive in that way. We're making buildings safer. As Chief Perdue says often, we're public safety for the public's safety. And then the other thing about codes is people that are a lot of people in this room, other OEMs like myself. These codes drive opportunity, right? Because to make these buildings safer, you need infrastructure, you need equipment. So when they walk into a room, they want to make sure that the signal gets through. They press the button, and the way they do that is by taking that signal and making sure it's in all the critical areas, right? Making sure that when they're down in a basement, they're in a stairwell, places where you don't really care so much about cellular coverage, but you certainly care about first responder and ERCS, emergency radio two-way responder coverage. I mean, that's where you want to make sure that the system is going to work, and it's codes that are out there and codes that are being developed that are driving to ensure that those systems work when it's needed.
Hey, Stan, do you ever see a technology disruptor here?
I don't think in public safety you could have a disruptor. I think you may have a faster acceptance of newer technologies, especially when you're talking about first and LTE, as more people are familiar with the technology. But as we've seen over the years, especially with our customers, there's always been a gradual migration to new technology in public safety. As we've seen it going from analog to digital, conventional to trunk system P25 phase 1 and 2, add in more features and applications supporting the emergency services. You need to have new technology be matured, proven to go through the tactical demands, the operational requirements to ensure the safety of emergency responders.
Okay, great. What about you, Dan? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I don't think there's going to be a revolution that you're going to have, let's say, a new technology that's just going to be taken over by storm the public safety sector. And you look back in 20 years from now, will there be a change? Definitely, but it's going to be incremental, it's going to be proven, and it's not going to be thrown in there, as just because it's the latest and greatest technology. You have to keep in mind also in New York City, you have the fire department. New York City, the West Coast cities, you have the South Florida, you have these big cities that are able to have the knowledge base. They have people on staff, they have the funding in order to put out new systems like that. But the majority of the AHJs, the majority of the municipalities that are regulating these systems are small and tiny budgets, and any change that they would make would happen over a longer period of time. So I don't think there will be any disruptors per se.
Okay, thank you. So we know also education is a key component to this. We need to make sure that there's certifications and people are staying on track. And I'm curious, John, do you feel that the industry is equipped with enough people qualified to do this work?
No.
Cocktail time.
I do want to answer this question, but I'm struggling to let the couple of answers that just happened stand. I see the disruption happening massively. What you heard was the answers from folks that are involved in the two-way space and in some ways the in-building space in New York City. From an in-building infrastructure perspective, where the real issue is not technology but funding and finding good reasons to pay for these systems, bringing in things like 5G, CBRS, building management systems and other things that can ride over the same infrastructure are changing fundamentally the funding models that get this technology done inside buildings. And let's face it, first responders do most of their work inside buildings, inside structures, okay? And so fire codes that require building owners to spend money in that space, that same infrastructure can be used to do all those other things, are rapidly changing the way infrastructure designers and developers and building owners see this technology. And that is a disruption. We've been surveying, and I've surveyed some of the people on this dais in the last week. The in-building space is growing at about a 15 to 20% clip just in the public safety space per year. That's not slow incremental growth, that's massive growth. Along with that is the need to be competent and the training that's required to do it. The other big disruptor in this space is in the in-building industry that has been largely, I mean, you see some of the legacy companies up here on the dais and in the audience. The newest entrants into this are not small companies. They're massive fire and life safety companies like Honeywell, Siemens, JCI, Potter, right, who are coming into this space. These are not small companies, and they're coming in at scale with big sales forces and with a need to better understand the nuances of RF design. That's a big lift. That's a big sales force, and that's a big technical force to train up to do this work correctly. It's going to take more than a village. It's going to take an industry to figure out how to solve for that. We have a big, heavy lift.
We definitely do. Rich, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's definitely a shortage. Like John says, there's a big train up. And I don't know that the shortage is as much on the technician side, but on the engineering side. Dino and I were talking outside, and the term old radio guys, right? That's what you tend to see.
Sure.
Mature radio guys. But it's, we've seen the engineering programs in the colleges and the universities move more towards the modern technologies, which is to be expected. So they're teaching wireless, they're teaching Wi-Fi and cellular DAS and things like RFID, and they're getting away from the traditional radio theory and antenna theory. So we're seeing a hole in younger engineers that are coming out of the universities. It's probably why so many of us that are like me with a few miles behind us are still in this space. But I do think it'll change. I think in the short term, we have a responsibility to mentor the younger engineers to make them aware of all the infinite issues with RF that you have to deal with. And then I think with the new requirements and the mandates driving this industry, and I would almost say that two-way radio in itself is again an industry disruptor because we're revisiting it. It's back in the forefront. And from there, I think that the schools will take notice, and there'll be some more RF engineering programs based on radio and more certifications.
So Dino, could we have the same person, the same technician, actually do both technologies, both new and mature?
That's a tough question. It's kind of open-ended. There's a different metric when you go and do an in-building installation for public safety as opposed to a cellular system. So now you have a technology that's coming out there that's a cellular-based that is introduced, such as FirstNet, but it's for a public safety, topology application. So, normally, in building designer would design for, as Dennis was saying, with every crevice that is needed for public safety, and they design per, coverage, not capacity, because if you have 4 channels, there's your capacity. You know it right there, but in a cellular system, you could be at a stadium, have a high capacity. So someone who's designing cellular DASs and doesn't know public safety DAS will have to get up to speed. But now you introduce that, hey, we have a technology called LTE that is going to be your database for a public safety system. So again, that's more cellular facing, and the guys will have expertise in there. So there might have to be some cross training where the cellular guys get to learn the public safety topology, but yet the public safety guys got to learn the technology of LTE systems.
Thank you. So Dan, what are your thoughts on that?
I think a skilled RF engineer, like Dino, would definitely be able to, go between cellular and, public safety from the technological standpoint. I find that the greatest challenge on the public safety side is educating actually the AHJs and what they're actually looking for. They see a lot of times in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, small townships, small municipalities, they have a code on their books that they don't really have a great understanding of. They're having to put the system in and they don't really understand it. So they were reliant on good RF engineers, good integrators to actually educate them and to help them implement these systems throughout. But from a RF standpoint, from RF engineering standpoint, I think it's something that can be by good RF engineers should be able to bridge the gap between the two sectors.
Okay, great. Stan, do you think or feel that there are adequate certification programs to qualify these technicians with an ARC system?
An ARC system, you said?
ARC system?
ARC system?
Or any of our technologies?
Yeah, I would say in general, in building DAS, each manufacturer has their own certification program, which is certainly a benefit to system integrators for the training, come up to speed on the equipment, new equipment as it gets released, instead of doing it all in-house. But overall design of emergency responder communication, that's all done in-house for the most part. It's like an apprenticeship program we go through with any new hire to move them through and gain the experience. And as I guess an old radio guy, I still think I can learn new things.
Mature.
Yeah, mature guy, yes. But we work both sides of this today. We still do a lot of Project 25 systems. We can do in-building systems public safety, but we still look at some of the cellular systems today.
Okay, and Dennis, how do you feel about that?
Well, first, I think there's this industry has way too many baby boomers, and we need more of those Gen Z and millennials, I guess, more involved to be on the engineering side. But no, so as Stan said, as an OEM, we have what's called my ADRF board. So you have those tools that are out there so that our system integrators and our partners can go out there and they do training. You want to get trained on a public safety system, you want to get trained on a cellular system, all of those tools are out there to do those certification courses. And every OEM has those types of things that are available. But I think it's, as we continue to move, we just have to realize it's always going to be a moving target, right? Because as technology changes, then training needs to change. You need to update a lot of the material that's out there. So as technology moves, then we as people in the industry, we need to move and we need to adapt, and we need, as I think what Dan said earlier, there's a lot of talented people that are out there. It's just making sure that they understand the differences between cellular and public safety. How many times have you been at a stadium where you've got 5 bars of coverage, but yet your message doesn't get out? You know, it's because it's a capacity issue, right? Where, you know, public safety, you're designing more for, you know, for coverage. So, you know, it's just understanding those differences and making sure that we're constantly, you know, training these folks and keeping them up to speed on new technologies that are coming down the pike.
Okay, great. So obviously the technology cycle, we've been seeing that. I mean, being in this industry as long as we have, we see it on a constant basis. With that said, Rich, do you feel that two-way radio systems belong, and where do you think they fall within the new technology?
I definitely think they belong, and I think they're going to be the primary communication device, voice communication device, now and well into the future. There's still a lot of, not that there won't be enhancements to the two-way technology, but two-way in its form, I think, is going to be the primary voice communication. I think it fits in the new architecture. I think that cell phones are going to be a great public safety aid, right? I think they're important. I think they're going to enable calls, emergency calls, but I don't know that they're ever going to be an actual public safety device. And the reason I say that as a primary device is that the cell phone it's completely dependent on the network. So if there's a large-scale incident that affects the network, your communications are out. The same thing can happen to a two-way radio system if you lose the repeater or you lose the in-building system. But it has the ability, it has higher power, and it has the ability to switch over to talk radio to radio, which in turn will give you limited, but it'll enable you to sustain some type of communication.
Excellent. Dino, any disruptors? Do you agree?
Yeah, mostly ditto what Rich said. I mean, you still have like a lot of the fire departments, they like to talk, you know, they have talk around groups and they're using, you know, VHF simplex, you know, because they can have their, you know, their conversations just between them, knowing that there's not going to be anything that is going to interfere with what's going on. So they can go to, you know, incident and they can segregate their communication just among them. And that's something, again, where it says is like training. It's something that's a slow roll. They need a constant and a superior communication at all times because it's mission critical. So again, what John was saying that there's a lot of new technology, and I think, yes, like Rich says, it's going to aid, you know, bringing 5G in where you might have like smart helmets where you can actually go in a building and almost see like a Google Glass kind of type of infrastructure of having information dialed into there. So yeah, in the future, you'll probably see those aids in there, but I think now, you know, again, first and foremost is having that solid communication amongst the emergency services.
Thank you. Stan, why do you think there's such a reluctance for first responders to move off into a new technology?
I think overall because it works, and it works well, right? So they're simply waiting, give me a better technology, something that would ensure the same thing, safety, reliability, in their everyday work environments, going out there in the field, saving lives. I think that will take time. You still need those hardened devices, military-grade devices. Again, we talked about the two-way radio approach with talk-around service. Even today, many of the firefighters operate fireground services on simplex, on simply talk-around mode. How do you replace that? It's going to be a challenge.
Dennis, if you were running into a burning building, what would you choose?
In what city? Got to make sure it's the frequencies that the HJ is required. So no, I mean, you know, it all comes down, you know, it works, right? I mean, you know, all of these first responders, they're comfortable with the technology, and you know, and you also have to think about I think John mentioned, you know, cost, right? I know in my town, you know, we have a UHF system, and sure, they're looking at FirstNet. But you know, they just invested, you know, almost $600,000 in handheld portable radios. You know, so it's, you know, there's a big cost associated when you have these municipalities that have these, you know, UHF networks and other things that are out there deployed. And so it's not only, you know, a comfort standpoint. They know that they're going to press the button, it's going to work. You know, it also it's a cost. It's a cost thing, right? So it's you know, it's kind of twofold as well as having that comfort factor, and then, you know, it's something new. You know, I've got to be trained on something new. How do I know I'm going to go into that building? It's going to work. You know, I know my UHF radio, it's worked for the last 20 years. You know, do I know that I'm going to go in there and I'm going to press the button and this, you know, this phone thing that I now have to use, you know, is it going to work? So you know, we know that obviously cellular communications are, you know, are very secure and it works. It's just going to take some time before these mature first responders become more comfortable in using the, you know, this newer technology.
Okay, thank you. So we hear about code requirements all the time. And John, I'm curious, are the code requirements the same if we were doing two-way radios versus, let's say, an ARC system, an in-building system?
Yes, and an ARC system, by the way, is only New York City. It's the only place where ARCs is used, and if you mean an ERRCS system, which is used in the rest of the country, you know, New York is a unique environment. It's an extremely vertical environment. A lot of high-rise buildings, so they came up with something special just for here, but that's another topic for another day. The fire code doesn't care about specific technology. Fire code is performance-based for the most part in this space rather than prescriptive. It just wants what the fire code says is that the frequencies and modulation technologies in use by the public safety agencies must be available inside the building. So it doesn't care if it's LTE, it doesn't care if it's LMR, it doesn't care if it's CBRS, 5G, or Gandalf with a magic wand and a pointy hat. It really doesn't care as long as the people that need to can communicate. And I think this is one of the disconnects, two disconnects I've been hearing as I've been listening to this panel. The first is, what is a first responder and what do they need, right? So three basic branches or three basic agencies, fire, police, and EMS, right? By far, the majority of 911 calls are routed to police, about 70%, okay? And so you're not always talking about running into a burning building with a need for a certain level of ruggedness and mission critical capability. Majority of 911 calls have nothing to do with that, right? The second thing is maybe a lack of awareness generally of the amount of development that's happening on the device side, which is doing mobile-to-mobile direct talk, mission-critical push-to-talk, hardening of these devices, right? And the fact that instead of a $5,000 or $7,000 two-way radio, you can have a hardened device that you could throw against the wall that would still work for $500. So fire code is written generically enough to accommodate every future technology that's going to come down the pike. The question is, what are the drivers that are going to change the way the industry behaves? And if you think money's not one of them, let's have a drink afterwards.
Okay. Dan, what about you? What are your thoughts?
It's interesting you said that about the, you know, the ARCs is strictly to New York City. And just to go back to what I was talking about before, the education, you know, the need to educate. We got a plan from an engineer in Hoboken, New Jersey, who sent us, and the spec code was the ARCs from New York City. So that does talk to that. As far as the differences in the, you know, the two-way radio versus the emergency radio, I don't, from the radio perspective itself, I mean, the technology is the same, getting the radios, you know, getting the signal out to their, you know, standards are pretty similar, neg 95 over 95, which was kind of the standard before. It's kind of the, you know, the standard for public safety as well. I would say the only thing where you see a big difference is in the ancillary, you know, the code requirements is in terms of the alarming, battery backup, the way they test it, you know, the grid testing and everything. So I would think that would be, you know, from a technological standpoint, on the radio system itself, not much of a difference, but from everything else together, you know, that's where we see the, you know, difference between public safety and two-way radios.
Excellent, thank you guys, I appreciate it. I don't know if we're gonna have time for questions and how we're doing so far, and I know everybody probably wants to exit pretty soon. Do we have any questions? So obviously the panel is gonna be here for the most part. We'll be located outside as well, so come to us with questions. We wanna continue this conversation. It's an important subject, for sure. We truly believe in. Gentlemen, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining this panel, and thank you to the audience.
We're going to just do a quick close.